So I'm using a sketch I produced about a month ago that took me a couple of hours to sketch, and I'll go through how I did this and try and redraw it a bit later, just showing you some of the tricks that I use. So before I show you some breakdowns of this, I thought I'd just go through this sketch and show you the layers, just so you can see how it's constructed. So this sketch was inspired by a trip to Disney World, or Disneyland, earlier in the year, and I was up early and was taking some photos of the sunrise. So I'll show you those pictures in a moment so you can compare. So basically it's very simple. There's a landscape, there's some hills in the distance, and there's a simple reflection, and the sky and the water are all similar tones. So I think one of the main tricks really with making these landscapes is to try and keep the colours to be very harmonious. And basically, although it may not look like this, there's really only one colour that's gone into most of this sketch, different tones of one colour. So I'll show you that in a moment. And then there's a lot of soft brushes that really bring everything together, and again I'll show you that in a moment. So the actual sketch is really just the clouds at the top, so you can see the clouds at the top. There's the hills at the back, there's this orange glow that provides the sunlight, and then there's the background. And that's really it. So there's really only four main elements to this sketch. This is very simple. Okay, so there's been no filters used for this. I've not tried to use dodge or burn to get any extra glow. This is all just drawn and using the colours that you can see without using filters. So today, the sketch that I'm going to do uses just a handful of brushes, which you can see here. So I've already shown these before when I did the clouds class. So most of the sketch that you can see is using the soft brush here. So this soft brush is used for a lot of the sketch. It's really important for most of it. And then I also make good use of this clouds brush here by Roberto Rendon, which allows me to lay down colour for clouds and to get a nice different tones quickly down. And then I use the crooked path clouds brushes to generate the clouds patterns. So these are the brushes that I used in the sketch that you just saw and that I'll use today. So just to go through references and how I use them and how you can use them. These were the sketches that I had as references. These are the photos I had as references for the Reborn sketch. So I had jet lag when I was in Disney World, and I was up at with the dawn, and just walking along through the resort, I caught these nice pictures on my iPad. So there's nothing special about these photos. I just took them as I was walking along, and you can see two photos here. And the one that I prefer of the two is this one, because I think that the colour, the tone in the background looks a lot nicer. In this one here, you can see this is really exposed. There's too much light there, and the colours aren't quite so nice. So for that reason, the one on the left is the one that I prefer, and was the one that inspired the Reborn sketch. And you can see the basic elements of what's in the Reborn sketch there. You can see the nice light in the sky, you can see the clouds, the views for the composition, and you can see the reflection. So you can see where the Reborn sketch has come from, but I think hopefully what you can also see is that it's a different spin on that sketch. I've not tried to repeat it directly, I've tried to use it as inspiration to create a new piece. So you can see the two here side by side. So yeah, GD, I'll just go through about sampling colours and what I try to do with that, and how I've tried to learn about colour using references. So when I started sketching, I had no idea of colour. I had no idea of how to build pictures, and you know, inevitably when I started, I would pick blues for the sky and greens for the grass, and it works up to a point, but you know, when you look at real skies and real landscapes, you find that the tones are a lot more subtle than that, and really the colour picker can help a lot, either to directly produce the pictures or to learn about the colours that are in the skies and the scenes that you can see. So what I try to do is to use references like these, and yeah, you can use colour picker. What you can also do is you can build a palette from those colours. So you can, let me just, I can't see it here, I can't see my palette at the bottom, but basically you can put your own colours into the palette and use those to make your pictures. Or you can try and replicate the colours from your head, having learnt about the colours that are in references, and over time, the more you do this, the more you can start to learn. You look at a picture and get quite close already to what the colour would be, and I think this is where I'm trying to get to. So for anybody who doesn't know how to do colour picking and how that might work, if you just hold your cursor over a picture, you'll see the colour wheel appear, and it will have sampled that colour. And by doing that over a picture, you'll be able to see which colours are which and how they all relate to each other. So, and then the other point is to be able to use a reference, you can, rather than load the reference directly into your picture, you can, using this landscape icon on the top left, you can sample pictures that are in your photo archive. So for example, here are some pictures, and there you can see you could have your picture that you want to reference, and then by holding your cursor over that picture, you can then sample various colours. And this is a very useful way of learning about colour and learning about the way images are made, and how you can try and replicate or put your own spin on those tones that you can see. So I've just highlighted within these pictures just some of the things that you'll notice if you do this, and so using the reference again that I started with, what I said at the start was that actually there's really only one colour in most of this picture, and that's a shade of orange. So the only difference is in the top right corner, where there is a blue tone that creates that shade in the top right corner. The rest of this sketch are basically shades of orange. So just to give you some examples of that, I've highlighted here all of the various colours if you use a colour picker that you would find, and you can see that sorry, I'm back. I just had a crash. So what you can see here is all of these shades of orange that you can see in the palette that are referenced, and so really all we're doing is changing the bars at the bottom, particularly the bottom bar left and right, making things darker and lighter to go up and down that square, and then the top bar, shifting it left and right, shifts that cursor left and right in the square that you can see there. So by moving around those bottom bars, you can reach any of those colours. So it's really straightforward. And just finally, I think there's another colour to highlight. Oh yeah. So the only difference really comes where the sun is, where you've got more yellow. So you can see that actually you have to change, in this case I would have changed the colour more towards the yellow end and using the very bright colours at the top. So where I've put that oval, that's basically what those colours represent, going from yellow to orange. All of one brightness, but shifting from yellow to orange. So this is just to, really all I'm trying to do here is highlight that we're looking at the yellow to orange range here for virtually the whole of this picture. And you know, at first glance it might not look like that. You might think the bottom right is more black, top right is blue, there's yellows, there's orange, there's pinks, maybe some greens, and it's not. It's very simple. And I think by keeping your palette simple, the result can look maybe a bit more realistic and a bit more harmonious. And so it's well worth trying to experiment with that. And obviously in this case I've used something that's fairly faithful to the original reference. But if I was trying to create an alien landscape, you know, I might use the same tricks, but you know, use greens or pinks or purples to create the same kind of landscape, and so it would look much more alien, but the tones would all still work within that. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. So let's have a go. So when I start a picture, I mean, I'm going to have a go at drawing this now. And again, you know, I do a lot of pictures that don't work, so I'm not going to guarantee this is going to be fantastic, but I think we'll see the process. And hopefully at the end of it, we'll have a decent background that I'll be able to upload. And then if you want to download that and add your own spin to it, I'm just going to do the background. I'm not going to add anything different to it. It'll just be the reflected light and the lake. But it'll be available if anybody wants to change it around. So when I start a sketch, what I like to do is to put some colour down straight away, so I'm not faced with this white page, because I think that's quite intimidating. When you're trying to build a landscape and all you've got is white, that's obviously, you know, there's nothing that's this white. So what I'm going to do first of all is give myself some colour in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the back and work forwards, and the back was the sky, and the sky would normally be a blue colour. But if you remember from the reference, it was more of this kind of grey tone. And these grey tones here, hopefully you can see this as I'm moving this around, these grey tones here are really the kinds of colours that are often in the sky, particularly when it's not full sunlight. And that was another point I wanted to make actually. The interesting skies for me are the ones just before sunset and just after sunrise, where you've got lots of subtle colours, rather than the midday ones where you've just got bright blue. So they're much more interesting to me when you've got the subtle shades within them. Okay, so colour fill the whole thing. So now it's a little bit less intimidating for some reason. I know it's just one colour, but already it seems like we've made some progress. So I use a lot of layers when I'm drawing, because that gives me the opportunity to delete stuff if I don't like it, to edit it more easily. So it's just the way I work. I'm going to use vector to create some hills. So vector, using the over mode, everything filled, no gradients here, just to generate a simple landscape. Yeah, Angie, I'm never usually up enough to photograph sunrise. The only reason I did was because I had jet lag. I think sunset is usually the only bit that I capture, but surprisingly it's just as beautiful, I found out recently. Okay, so there we've got some hills. Yeah, I can add a few layers of hills, make it a little bit more interesting, possibly. Doesn't really matter. Keeping them on separate layers because that gives me the option to edit them later on if I want to. I can delete bits of this to make it look a little bit more accurate. So I don't know what accurate is, this is just made up. What I would suggest, I mean, this is one type of landscape class. There's plenty of really good landscape artists on Sketch Club, but recently Craig Art has been producing some fantastic landscapes and in a very quick style, and he's produced a video that's well worth checking out if you get a chance. Okay, so there we go. I'm just deleting using the square so I can get a nice straight edge, because obviously on the landscape, on the horizon, it's usually fairly flat in the far distance. So I've now got two lines of hills. I can colour those in later, I can shade them, but this is just to get some structure to the sketch. Okay, so sky. So I'm going to use the soft brush. I think this is a great brush for getting colour down. I'm in this orange zone here, somewhere up here. I make the brush really full so that I get subtle colour over a large area, and I use the opacity below 50% usually. And so now when I brush this over, again a new layer, I'll put this layer below the hills because obviously it's behind, this is the sky. And now you can see you get this soft glow of where the sun was. The same is going to happen in the reflection. So I've obviously not put the hills reflecting yet, but I want to do the lake while I've got it here. So I'll just build up this colour roughly opposite. One other thing I remember was that what tends to happen in that, when I was looking at the reflection, what I noticed was the sky is very bright, lots of whites, lots of pale colours here at the top. So you can see this zone here, that's really where you've got the very bright colours. And we talked about how if you shift this to the yellow, that's going to get more towards the sun was. So that's what I'm going to get right on that horizon above the hill. But the other thing was, down in the reflection, it's not a perfect match. You've not got the same orange in the water. It's actually the same orange but a bit darker. So if I just sample this colour, holding the cursor, this is the colour I'm at. If I just shift this down a bit, that'll be that'll be the match that you would see in the water. So it's a little bit darker, but it's the same sort of colour. And darker still over here, and darker still. So really at the moment it's just about getting some colours down to try and start to give a sense of what we could see before. Okay, so I'm just doing this at the moment from what I remember. If you're not confident with that, and I'm not confident with that a lot of the time, you know, I'd like to use a reference to give me ideas, but also, you know, it can be helpful if you're not sure about colours, or if you think, well, this doesn't look like it's quite working. You can then, you know, you can get your reference up and have a look and think, what am I trying to achieve? Is this going where I want it to go? You know, it's really straightforward. So, you know, you can sample, you can look, you can test, you can try and make it up again yourself. You know, this is, you know, it's whatever you want it to be. So it's not really a competition about who can use a reference or who can't. It's just about trying to be inspired by what you can see. And mostly we're inspired by what we see and trying to reproduce it. And I think I've seen some really excellent artists on Sketch Club saying that they can't do things with their imagination, but they produce the most amazing sketches and they've got all the skills. And I think just looking at things and slightly reinterpreting them is not so difficult when you have a go. So Okay, so that's basically the structure, and again I'll use loads of layers here. Okay, so I think what you can see in my reference at the top is that, you know, the colours I've got here are probably getting towards where I was. I mean, there's a bit more light happening on the horizon. That'll really make it shine. But what makes a big difference in that, and again, a lot of these things are accidental, is the clouds at the top. So you can see how the clouds at the top really add that extra light. The sun, when it's coming up, reflects off those high clouds, and that's, you know, it looks natural, but it really helps to give you the balance of the light at the top and the dark at the bottom. So let's try and have a go at that. So I've got a new layer. I'm going to make some clouds at the top, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the Roberto Rendon brush, which is this one. This helps me to get down some Okay, I'm back. Okay, so let's, I think Roberto's brush was too much. Let's have another go. So I'm going to go for a pale colour up here. This is where those clouds are. And first thing is just to get some colour down. Then I erase some of it, because obviously that at the moment doesn't look like a cloud. It's not really fitting into the background. So what I want to do is make it look a bit more cloud-like. So I use the cloud brush and I erase from that. So I'm not erasing necessarily on full opacity, which would just create a big gap. I mean, that can work quite well. Just going around the edges, just to kind of take away those obvious repeating units, so it doesn't look so regular. It looks a bit more like a cloud. I'm creating some depth, so can you see there? I've just created a hole at the top left, and by creating a few layers of this, it'll look far more realistic than just one layer of cloud. So I'll do another layer of cloud. I'll make this darker so you can see behind where it's gone. So I'm actually putting it behind the other layer of clouds. So it's kind of fuzzed it all out there. Now I'll erase bits of that. So now I've got two layers of clouds, and at the moment that looks pretty flat because the colours I've used are fairly similar. So if I make this really pale and just gently highlight using the on mode where those clouds are, I'm going to use the soft brush because the clouds themselves actually have gradations of colour from top to bottom, and they're usually darker on one side and lighter on the other. At the moment the sun's below, so they should be lighter underneath. So I just highlight the very bottom here. You can pick out bits of cloud there, and then the clouds behind will be a bit darker. And so this is a way, again, I mean, usually I'm constantly experimenting here until it starts to look okay. There's nothing, you know, I don't really know what it should look like. I'm just experimenting. And at some point you think, yeah, that kind of looks how it should. So what I liked in the reference was how it wasn't a single cloud. You actually could see through it. You could see through to the background. I want to recreate that kind of effect. So I'll go back to the one behind because that's kind of blocking things out at the moment. That's more like it. You can start to see areas where it looks okay, areas where not. So can just merge those two layers together. Another thing that can work quite well is if you smudge these, and you get more of these kind of wispy clouds. So that's on too strong, so what I'll do is I'll turn that down a bit, and you can create more of a wispy effect and kind of lines of cloud, which might look okay. So that's looking too bright at the moment, but that's something that can be worked on. And so similarly, I'll create some more across the sky because I think that was important. One thing that this soft brush work does really well is it helps to kind of bring everything together. So by going over something with a brush like that, you can provide a more harmonious gradient across that line, as you can see. So it's gone from kind of blue to orange, but because of the line that I've done over the top, it's created a smooth gradient between them. So let's see. So, you know, clouds are not just one thing. Often there's, you know, lots of haze as well, and that's really what I'm trying to recreate here with this. So I'm using some smudge. There we go, sort of getting the effect. It's smudging using a soft brush, yeah. So it's a soft brush. Spacing, usually I've got it turned off, so it's more of a smear. And yeah, soft brush seems to work pretty well. Trying not to create some obvious lines there. I just want to create a sort of, yeah, that's, no, that doesn't look right. I've just created obvious lines within that, so that's not what I'm trying to achieve. So I'll just go back there. Okay. So again, I mean, this looks really flat at the moment, and the reason for that is that the hills, they're not lit very well. It's all one colour. So I'm going to have to highlight the areas of the hills to show where light's shining onto it. And I've got to put the sun in there. That'll create a focal point. But you know, you can see the basic structure is starting to appear. Mostly when I'm doing these sketches, it's just all about, you know, experimenting. You know, when I see a reference, I don't think, unless I used a grid, I don't think I could actually replicate it. It always would end up being some approximation of it. And so I don't try to. I think it's just easier to try and approximate it, and then you can end up with some nice, interesting side diversions by doing that, and some new effects that you maybe hadn't thought about. I think that's one of the nice things about this. So let's have a look. So I'm now using a reference that was referenced from a photo, so it's getting even further away from the original. But the key thing here, as you can see, is that effect around the sun. That really creates the focal point in the sketch. So I'm going to go to the top, create a new layer, and I want to create the orange glow around where the sun was. So these are just going to be these colours here that I will be using. So I'll start here, and again, this is just guesswork, but I could easily sample the image if I wanted to. So I'll first of all start with the background, because I think that'll be where it's really key. I'll shift more towards the yellow, more towards the yellow again. That's I've got to soften the edges of that. It's a bit too sharp around the edge. So get a bit more of a gradient going up. Okay. So now I need to put the sun in, and again, like with a lot of these things, it's not. You can see if we look really close at that, it's not just a round, simple sun. It's white at the top and a bit yellow underneath, and that subtlety there, I think, is what makes it look a little bit more like the sun. So I think a lot of these things, it's just trying to. Oh, I think I've got to turn up my colour. So I'm using the soft brush because I don't want it to be a perfect, what I could do is okay, I'm back. So what I could have done instead of doing the soft brush is drawn a circle with vector, and you end up with something like that. That's clearly not going to work in this kind of context. It's too hard. So by using the soft brush, I'm able to get more of the effect of the light. But there is definitely, blinding white light in amongst it that you're trying to replicate. So, starting to get it. So, this basic idea is there. What's standing out to me is that I'll just use a new layer and highlight some things that already catch my eye as not being good enough yet. So, this zone here is too hard. So there's an obvious gradient, there's an obvious line there that doesn't work. That's not soft enough yet. This still isn't right. It's still, it doesn't quite shine. So I've got to soften the edges of that into where the yellow light will be. So I need to get some yellow around the edge of that to give that more of a sort of a bleed into the background rather than it standing out. So that's still not right. And obviously I need to fix this because that shouldn't be, that should be lighter down there. And I need to reflect the light, the hills into the lakes, because at the moment you wouldn't know this was a lake without the reflection. So there's still things to work on, but this is usually where I'll spend the next hour improving things. Okay. So yeah, quite often what I'll do is once I've got some colour laid down like this, I'll be sampling the colours themselves. And that can help me when I'm working between layers. So this is the layer with the sun on it. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the on mode. So if I use the on mode, that allows me to just put colour onto the layer, the elements of that layer. So for example, if I use a different colour and use on, what I'm doing then is just putting colour onto that sun and it becomes green. So it's a really useful way of making sure that you can keep the colours that you want in the right areas. So we should be in the yellow end here, blinding brightness, and so now you can see I've softened the edges of that. It fits a bit more into the edge of the background. What I need to do is also work on the background to make that a bit more similar. I'll try and keep that in a bit. get this so it's a bit more, there's a bit more of a gradient working out from this. So this pink, orangey colour. And then the sun again needs to be whitened up a bit to make that brighter. I'll use the on mode for that. Starting to get there a bit more, so I've lost some of the yellow around the sun. So I think it's not super interesting watching this, but it's just really the process I have to go through. It's not quick, but I'm brushing a lot. I'm putting a lot of brush strokes on all the time, constantly trying things. Yeah, that doesn't really work. Go back. Just to try and, until it starts to look okay. There's no quick solutions to this. It's just what it is. So yeah, this orange here is very nice. So I'll try and get that up there a bit more. I've got a red line over there I don't want. Hopefully I can delete that. Yeah, good. Yeah, I mean that's true, Wendy. I think like there's I would like to sketch more quickly at times to be able to get ideas down, but actually in the end it always takes longer. And one thing I've learned is that because I've never really been somebody who's done a lot of art in my life, and so I don't have the technique. I can't just look at something and immediately know how I'm going to draw it. Every single time I do a picture, I have to almost learn again how to create the effects. I know certain things, I know how to use certain tools to be able to get effects, but I don't immediately know how I'm going to create a picture. And most of the time I'll spend like this, where I'm looking thinking, yeah, that looks okay, that doesn't, and just working, and at some point it kind of looks okay, and quite often it'll get loaded and it's still not really finished, but it's about as far as I want to go with it. There's not many that I feel like I've really properly finished, as well as I'd like to. So, it's just about having a go, really, and I'm only doing it for fun. I'm not trying to earn money from it, so I don't get any stress from not getting it right. It's just how it is. Right, so I'm going to put some light onto the hills. Yeah, I think that's right, GD. I need to put some something in the sky to give it a bit more interest. So I'm using the on mode here, and I'm just gently adding a bit of light. Trying to soften it up. Go down to there. And then the hills underneath, the same thing, just so it's not standing out. I'll merge those two together just for now, and create the reflection. So copy that down, transform it, Okay, I'm back. Okay, so I'm going to transform that again. So copy that down. Oh, sorry, not copy it down, merge it down. Copy those two hills down. Transform. Okay, so they're the two layers. The actual hills in the background, they're going to be quite sharp, whereas the hills that are in the water are going to be less so because the water itself will be rippled, so they should be a bit more smudged and blurry than the ones at the top. So I'm going to treat those slightly differently. So first of all, I'll do the hills at the top. And I'm going to use the blur brush and just going along the edge, I'm just dabbing the edge just to slightly blur the outline, because obviously something in the distance isn't going to be perfectly sharp to our eyes, it'll be a little bit blurry. So I'm not trying to make it too blurry, just enough. But the one underneath has to be much less defined than that, so I think I'll use the smudge to try and do that. And all I'm going to do again is just dab. Oh, sorry, I've just used the wrong one now. That's it, go onto that layer. So that's too much, obviously. So in order to get that mirror, I just copied it and then flipped X so that it flipped it over. And then once I'd flipped X, I went into the gear option on the bottom right, where you can see the numbers of where it is in the XY position. So I made sure in the Y position it was 0, so it was perfectly level with the image above. And so then it was flipped, it was moved to where it had to be, and then it was zeroed in the Y axis so that then it was directly underneath the image above. So I'll make this brush small because then you can get a bit more of a ripple effect. So it's not perfect, the bottom, but it's supposed to give it the effect of it being a bit more rippled. Hopefully you can see that effect. The other thing is this edge here has to be a bit more blurry as well, between the sets of hills, because that's too sharp at the moment. So I'm just quickly sort of going left and right over the top of that, and it kind of smears it all a bit, blurs it all a bit, and that's fine. Okay, and I need to blur up the image above a bit more because that lighter hillside underneath isn't blurry enough. There we go. So now if I go over the top of that with a new layer, so this is going to be underneath the sun but over the hills with a real orange glow, I should be able to create, and I'm going to use the on mode. So what I'm going to do is actually I'll merge these two hills together, so that's now one thing. So anything I do to that will be the same. So for example, what I can do is make it darker, make it on. I can get a bit more harmony across it now. And then at the bottom I make this a little bit darker because obviously in the water it's a bit darker than it is in the sky. You can start to see the effect. Right, okay. So what I want to do is to create a zone at the top. Let me just get the reference up so you can see. So you can see around the sun there's all of that orange that's over the hills. I think that is a really nice effect. It creates a real glow, so I'm going to try and replicate that. Because at the moment this looks really cold without that. So I'm going to go to the layer above. So there's nothing in this layer at the moment. So this is the layer above the hills. I'm going to go for a nice orange colour. So let's see, I'll choose that. That's the colour I've chosen. Let's see how close that was to the one that was there. Yeah, it's not far off. So in the on mode here, what this will do by choosing on mode, although I'll put colour across this whole area, it will only add it to the layer below, where the layer below is, as if I was doing it in on mode there. So it means that if I don't like it, I can delete it, and I'm not deleting the hill layer. It's only deleting the orange layer that I'm just going to create now. So I'll just show you. So you can see, although I'll put it into normal, and then you can see where it's gone. So you can see it's going all over the place, this orange. But so you can see there's a lot of orange there, but if I switch this to on mode, you can see how it's only on the hills. So that's too strong, but make it a little bit redder. So I want to soften the edges. Okay. So looking at that reference, the sky needs to be more interesting. More clouds will help, and more colour to tie that sun into the background. That's what's really missing. So there's a few things at work there that you can see. One is there's more yellow around the sun. The other thing is that these clouds that just above the hill there in yellow, these are kind of distant low clouds. That really helps, I think, to give a bit more interest in the sky. Or I could put, a contrail across, as GD said. It could be anything like that. So it just needs a bit more detail there. That whole top left region there gives it the interest, which without it, as you can see here, it looks a bit more like an alien landscape where you would have no clouds in the sky. But you get the idea of, a lot of it just comes down to your eye after this. It's basically everything I've just shown you, just doing it, carrying on doing it until you get to something that starts to look how you want it. So let's have a go. Yeah, Godzilla in the background might be a good idea. I think that would definitely create a focal point. I think if I upload this and let Seb have a go, he'd be much better at that than me. Okay, so another brush actually that I didn't have on my sheet, but is one that I've been using quite a lot recently, is one that Les Scott produced. So it's this one here. I'll just put it on the top left of this image so you can see it. That one is great. It produces lots of nice effects, like soft effects, and so I'll show you in a moment. But this is nice for creating some lines that could be clouds that you can then smudge into more cloud-like shapes. So let's have a go. So you can download this brush. I think it's in concept art. So it's one less got produced. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, but I think it's every time I choose a new brush, it seems to crash. So again, a new layer, and I just, at some point you can start to merge. So for example, this layer here and the background are all the same thing, so I can merge that. So when you start running out of layers, you can look to see where you want to, merge a few layers. I think that's part of the background, so I'll merge that down. So what I won't do is I won't merge the hills into the background because I might want to edit those further. And I won't merge the clouds into the background because they still need a lot more work. And I won't merge the sun into the background because that still needs some more work. But basically they're the key elements that you've got there. There's the overall colour of the background, there's the hills, the sun and the clouds. They're all on separate layers. So let's have a go at creating a bit more interest in the sky. It's not that one, this one. So I've got this is an empty layer. I'm going to move this down so it'll be behind the hills and it'll be where the clouds are. I've got the Lescott brush and I'll just make it about 50%, and so I'll show you the effect of the brush. I'll make it much darker. I'll do it in a different colour so you can see. It's kind of soft, and the more you do over it, it becomes much harder in any direction. But you can make it really hard. The brush can be really like a pen, or if you make it large, it can be a bit more of this kind of soft effect. So it's an interesting brush, and you can create these layers that are really good. And at the end of the brush, you get this kind of weird sort of smudgy effect. So it's nice for getting down colour. So these are high clouds. They're going to be really lit by the sun. So what I'm looking for are these kind of top colours where the white on the shading it's down at the white end, and I'm looking in this region here. This is where it's going to really catch the light. So I'll get some lines down first of all. And then I'll work with some smudging to try and get those into a bit more of a shape. So you can see the effect of the smudge is to really lose those obvious lines, and you can then start to create these wispy clouds. If I don't like things, what I can do, you can selectively just erase. Obviously there's a stripe there that doesn't look right. So, but at the top right, I quite like that. You've got those wispy clouds going up, so that looks okay. Bottom left, bits of that look okay. So I'll try and erase bits and see if I can make that look better. I'll use the cloud brush that we talked about before. So take away the hard edges. I'll go use the on mode, see if I can improve it. It really is just experimenting. So that's worked well there. I've just added some colour in the on mode to the top of this cloud, and it's created slightly patchy effects there that make it look a bit softer. Seems to work. Obviously, this is a time you can say, right, okay, that's if you don't like it, you can think, well, do you want to look at your reference? Does that help? Look at a different reference. That's the other thing, actually. So what I'll quite often do is I might take, for example, you might take the top left of this picture and say, yeah, I like that bit, but I want to include that with another picture of something else, of some other buildings or some other scene, and try and, create something new from it. So it might be the thing that I'll really like in this picture could purely be this part here. Those trees and that background, that might be the only bit of the whole picture I really like. I really like the colour, I really like the differences in colour there, and that might be the basis for a new picture. And that's really what I'm doing when I'm looking at references, is just trying to spot things that really appeal to my eye and seeing what else I can do with that. So, that looks a bit soft. I'm not getting the punchy light there. I've struggled to choose the right colours. What are the colours here? It's bright, it's really bright. I'm close. So it's not that I'm choosing the wrong colours. What's happening is I'm not getting enough onto the layer. So the layer itself is not strong enough. The cloud in that layer is not strong enough. So it's still opaque. So if I copy this down a bit, doubling it up, you can see now this cloud has become more punchy here. It's shining out even more. And so is this. So now I'm starting to get the kind of contrast I was looking for. And the same I think is going to happen with this cloud at the top. I need to copy that down a few times. So I'm getting the same cloud, I'm just making it brighter. And that's now starting to give me the brightness I was looking for. So really now it's just a case of trying to get the colour. And that's just so I'll copy those down, merge them down, those two layers. Use the on. So again, this starts to get, where it gets a bit tedious. You just constantly experimenting until it starts to look okay. The other thing that's really striking here is that background, that salmon colour in the background near the horizon. That's really good. Mine's kind of muddy grey at the moment, and I think if I can bring that in, the clouds will start to look better as well. So I'll create a new layer, and if it works then I'll be able to merge it down to the bottom layer. So okay, that's just crashed. So has anyone got any questions or? The only bad thing about being there was the fact that I was at a meeting, so I wasn't there with my family, so it wasn't as good as it could have been. But it was nice. The weather was great. How do I get my ref pick on the same screen as your sketch? Okay, so if you go to the top left, you can see a small. So if you make your picture not so it's not occupying the whole screen, and you can see the background, you can see there's a little panorama icon just underneath where your layers menu is. If you click on that, you can now see your pictures that are in your camera roll. So I've got pictures of my dog and pictures of other stuff, and so you can save your ref pictures there. And once you've got it, you can then move it around. You can make it big, you can make it small. One thing I noticed, I saw Craig Art give a class about a year ago, and one thing he did to create a really impressionistic look, he made his picture really small. He didn't have a reference picture, but he made the picture he was using really small, and that helped him to get a sense of the light and the colour to see if he was getting the right effects he was looking for, and I think that's quite useful. So again, if you when you click on the actual picture, you can make it bigger and small as you want. So I keep that big, and if I do use a reference picture, I might keep that quite small, and that helps me to get a sense of what I'm looking for. And then you're not looking for individual details. What you're looking for is the overall colour and lighting that you're trying to achieve. And definitely, you know, when it doesn't seem to be working, if I'm not sure, if I can't quite get it, if I'm not quite getting the colours, I'll go to the picture and I'll sample that colour, and then I'll either use it directly, or I'll look at it on the colour wheel and think, you know, where was I going wrong? Why was it not quite there? And then try and, you know, you can then move away and see if you can get back to where it was, you know, move around and see what you think. So that's really just to try and train me, because one thing that I really struggle with is if I go outside and look at a landscape, I find it very difficult to look at that landscape and put it down onto a picture. I'm still trying to do that. So, but by doing this, I'm hoping that over time I'll get to learn how to see the colours really accurately, so that I can then get them onto the page. So, but that's just my own personal challenge. I don't think it's essential to be able to create these pictures. It's just something I'm trying to do. So I'm going to work on this some more. I think, you know, this is basically the main things I needed to show you. I think I'm showing you the process, and I'll carry on working on this, you know, for a while. But I think you get the idea of what I do. I'm using a limited number of brushes to get the effects I'm looking for. I use smudge and blur as well to soften the edges around things. And I'm using the on mode a lot, different layers and the on mode a lot, to keep my colour confined within the layers that I'm interested in. So I think that's really important. And then really a lot of the time it's just about practicing, experimenting until it starts to look okay. That's just down to your eye and what you're trying to achieve. And I guess the other thing is what I'm usually doing with my pictures, which I hope you can see in my pictures, is, you know, you saw the original reference that I used for this, which was, I think, not this one. It was this picture here, and you could see what I ended up with. It doesn't really look the same, although you can see obvious elements within it, and that's often what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to put a new spin on something I can see. And what I found was I did this picture and I got to a point like this where I was quite happy with it. The sky was better than this, but you know, this is still a work in progress. So I ended up with a nice scene. It looked good, but it was still an empty scene. And I'll just load it and show you again so you can see where I got to. So I got to this point here where I'd got everything like this, and I thought, yeah, that looks quite nice. You know, it's a nice picture, but it just didn't still have it in it, and it didn't have anything of interest within it. You know, it was like a photo of a nice scene, and I'm usually trying to create something that's got a bit more in it than that. And so there were lots of ideas that I had, and some of which completely defeated me. I thought about creating a staircase in there somewhere, maybe going into the water. And I remember Audie Klein once said that stairs were the bane of his sketch club existence because they're so hard to draw. And I had a go at drawing them, and they are really difficult to draw. So I gave up on that idea. I thought about, you know, maybe turning it into a beach scene, having surfers walking along. You know, there was lots of things I thought about, and because I'm not fantastic at drawing stuff, most of them defeated me. So in the end, I went for something quite simple, which is really just because of my own limitations of trying to draw people. I can't draw people very well, so my people tend to be very small, little sketches, and with this boat to provide a bit of a story within it. And that was just a consequence of, you know, my own limitations of drawing, but also, you know, trying to put something with a bit of interest in there. So I think, you know, what I'll do is I'll load up this background and without the boat and without the people, and if people want to use this and add their own spin, that would be cool. But yeah, that's generally, you know, in the other pictures that I do, I'm just trying to add a story somehow. It could be anything really, and it doesn't always work. Yeah, Loch Ness Monster would be good. That would, yeah, that would definitely would have been another solution. And I think I'm not great at drawing monsters. I think that probably would have been why I wouldn't have eventually done it. But yeah, so, you know, in the end, that's the way I work, I guess. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for coming. I know it didn't end up being a really finished sketch, but I think you got a sense of what I'm doing, and I'll try and stream a bit more in future because I know I don't often stream, but I'll try and stream a bit more when I'm doing some pictures so that, you know, you can just see as I'm trying to build things how I'm going. Usually, I mean, this sketch took 2 hours to do in total, this one. Some of them take 3 or 4 hours, but, you know, it's something I'll never know when I start how long something will take. I just start and see where it goes. Okay, thanks everyone. I really appreciate you coming.